So this is the first part A of the Kudilar TV channel online on the internet. This is the first part being started at 8:30 hours GMT, 8:30 in the morning in London, UK, on Thursday, the 8th of April 2021. And this one we call financial crimes. And the reason why we call the financial crimes is because it's a facilitator of the big financial crimes and criminals. And it's a denier of the existence of society. And it tampers with things, it tickles. So this is the kind of more perfect form of Fleet Street lying, because it appears to be not following the Daily Mail and the Daily Express or the Scum or the Daily Borisgraph, but in fact, it consolidates their lying under the cover of being a financial kind of newspaper, which it is not. It is a peddler of lies, and it has been a peddler of lies under various disguises. Having said all of that, we say that the disclaimer of this program and this campaign and this presentation is in principle the same as it has been from the beginning. And we update this by saying that in addition to looking at the corruption and the lying by Fleet Street and by Fleet Street and by the Parliament, we shall increasingly look at the content and the role of the various so-called research outlets and activities and centers run and operated by the so-called academic establishments, which are typified by Oxbridge but not confined to Oxbridge. And our first introductory comment about those outlets and operations refers to two pieces that we have examined in the last 24 hours. One is the item from a person linked to a kind of research project based at the Leicester University called De Montfort University. It was actually Leicester Polytechnic before it. And the other one is the one located at the University of Cambridge. It's an Indian woman called Priyambada Gopal. Now, when she hit the controversy button more than 12 years ago, I think, and was being engaged in criticism leveled at her by the racists, and there was no visible expression of solidarity or support or understanding of whatever she was saying at the time. And we communicated to her and we posted on the Indie Media website expressions of solidarity. But she didn't respond, she didn't acknowledge. And this is not exceptional. This is what most of the academics with the Asian or African backgrounds. I mean, she's a recent arrival in the UK. She's not been here in the UK for long, but the various connections, the imperialist connections, have facilitated her being placed at the University of Cambridge. And the reason why she didn't acknowledge or communicate is not an accidental omission. That is part of our agenda, the part of the narrative that Priyambada Gopal is in place, installed to promote and perpetuate. And she is hostile to the Muslims, and she is hostile to the campaigns against the anti-Muslim racist organizations and activities in this country. Now, as we have said before, the reason why we mention anti-Muslim racism is not to do with any organizational key purpose in our campaign that is specifically operated to defend only Muslims. The distinction is that the frequency, the number, and the contents of the attacks on Muslims for being Muslims are so high that we have to deal with those as evidence of racism operated by anti-Muslims focusing on Muslims. Think about that. So if, for example, the Sikh religious faith or community, SIKH, were under attack, we would be defending them exactly in the same way as we defend the truth about the Muslim community being targeted. And I have been in solidarity with the Sikh community going back decades. And I went to Edinburgh in response to an invitation from somebody who knew my existence. But I wouldn't have gone there. Edinburgh is quite a distance from London, the way I operate, because it disrupts a lot of my work. But I went there to give my solidarity, express my solidarity with the Sikh community in Edinburgh that was under attack at the time. And so therefore I am not speaking theory, I'm speaking actual practice. And the contrast with the likes of Priyambada Gopal, for a start, she was not even born, I don't think, in any mature way. She was not here at the time that I went to Edinburgh. So she cannot compare anything that she was doing at that time or she has done since then. She has not extended her, quote, intellectual support to the various Muslim communities. She has not mentioned, as far as the entry today that we have retrieved from the Wikipedia entry on the Tony Sewer, not her name, we are calling Tony Sewer, the sewer. She has not mentioned the Batley parents' protest, which has been roundly condemned by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Gavin Williamson, and the Fleet Street, including a particularly toxic and corrupt and criminally conceived untruth, pack of lies and hatred by Trevor Terrible Kavanagh on the Sun, who just said openly that democracy is being killed by the parents protesting against the teacher at the Batley Grammar School. So what we are looking at when we say that it's the diagnosis, world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street, we actually mean it. We diagnose the contents of the Fleet Street papers, we diagnose the sources, and we diagnose the contrast and the context and the narratives. So it's not just like making a comment on the front page or front pages of the papers. It's going deep as possible, factually, historically, evidentially. And what the omission from Priyambada Gopal of any reference to Muslims shows is that although she has claimed that she is against the legacy and the role of the empire and imperialists, she is actually perpetuating the main thesis against Muslims that the British Raj operated during the 190 years that it was officially in place. And the actual realities of the lack of democracy, lack of accountability, ethics and morality that dominate the behavior of governments and the media, the academies, the so-called political parties across the subcontinent. And when we say subcontinent, we include Bangladesh, India, Pakistan. We also include the others, kind of less closely connected with the 190 years, Sri Lanka and Nepal, Bhutan and other places. What we have in this broadcasting program and campaign is a combination of the university level diagnosis and a combination of the political level diagnosis and a combination of the lying perpetuation being done via the academic so-called institutions. So, there is a piece in a thing called Conversation or Conversations online, it's conversation.com, which carries a piece about Shamima Begum. And it appears to be posted sometime in the afternoon, early afternoon of yesterday, Wednesday, the 7th of April 2021. Now, that is kind of supposedly a piece criticizing the mainstream Western media's alleged obsession with Shamima Begum's change of gear, the dress, the Western dress she is reportedly wearing. But the main sources, the main references exclude the community, both in Tar Hamlets and in the wider demography in the UK, the Muslim community, Muslim women. And they don't have any reference to the Muslim women across the world. And that doesn't have any definition, description of Muslim society or Ummah or faith or the Sharia or any of the significantly different values that shape and identify and embody the Muslim culture and community. And it is a piece, well, this is not the piece, this is the Sun today, so we are just carrying on about the lies about the propaganda. And they're lying about they're denying the reports that the vaccine carries danger and risk of blood clot. So this piece in the conversation about the Western media's obsession with the dress that Shamima Begum has been wearing, or dresses, is dependent very much on the main racist assumptions that are carried on and carried out by the quote Muslim woman writer or contributor. This writer, although she's saying about the Western media's obsession with Shamima Begum's dresses, she is actually mentioning only the Guardian and other similar outlets where she has contributed. Now, the evidence is that all of those she has contributed to and is kind of presenting as her justification for being accepted as a legitimate commentator and thinker and analyst. All of those are racist and anti-Muslim and have been. And she has no recognition of the central racist purpose behind the media being, as she calls it, obsessed with Shamima Begum's dresses. And she mentions with reverence Edward Said and his Orientalism. Now we have to fact check the actual contents and the role of the Edward Said work. But we know that Edward Said was a product of the Western Orientalists and racists. And he was very cagey and in effect in denial about the Muslims across the world, and especially the Muslims of Palestine. So this piece about Shamima Begum's dresses is itself an extension of the very Western media that the particular person appears to be condemning and criticizing. And the media narrative is the same, because there is no mention of the community in Tower Hamlets, where all the actual brainwashing and criminality and criminalization of these four schoolgirls took place. And we have been the campaign, we are the campaign, defending the community since before this particular writer was born. And so therefore, we are not surprised that this person has been given this platform by the racists who are in control of the particular platform that she has got this piece in. She says that she has been working for a month about this, but it seems that she has not, because she has not heard the main campaign, which is our campaign, about Shamima Begum and the other three girls' rights. And the duty is neglected by Tower Hamlets Council to safeguard the children, and all the implications of the failure to discharge that duty or those duties. And so what we are saying is that racists have hired the academic equivalents of various degrees of Mir Zafar, and they kind of use them as addendas to perpetuate their main theory. And the theory is that the ordinary people in the communities are not worth even mentioning. And the racists did the same thing when they deployed these Monica Ali to disfigure and defame and distort and to exploit and misappropriate the name Brick Lane and attack the community with worse form of severity and depravity than even Leslie Garner had done. Now, these people would not have heard of Leslie Garner. Leslie Garner was party to the racists' assault on the Muslims, Bangladeshis of Sylheti background in Brick Lane. So there are 4 factors there in the early 1970s. And I organized the defense of the community against that. I organized the defense of the community, and I have been organizing the defense of the community for all these times, all these years, since. And the fact that this particular writer claims to be familiar with the Bangladeshi community and has not any understanding, awareness of the main campaigns that I have been involved in, including this campaign for justice for these 4 schoolgirls. The campaign we initially called Campaign for Justice for Shamima Begum, but we have extended its range and we are calling it Campaign for Justice for these 4 schoolgirls. And for the last 3 calendar months, we have been daily diagnosing the failures of the racist Tower Hamlets Council, which has been fronted by the 2 corrupt occupants of the corrupt post of elected mayor, Lutfur Rahman and John Biggs. So what we are saying today in this disclaimer updated is that we shall be diagnosing chapter and verse of every accessible to us, that is, academic piece of distortion that refers to either Shamima Begum, the 4 schoolgirls, or Muslim women or Muslims generally. And we shall, of course, include all relevant references in our diagnosis of racism, parallel kind of to the diagnosis of the anti-Muslim road or roles and narratives. So this one is saying that Oxfam is barred from bidding for aid cash after latest sex claims. Now contrast this with the claims of anti-Muslim racism and hatred, complaints made by Muslims or on behalf of the seekers of the truth, and complaint made against Johnson. Would Johnson be subject to any investigation? No. Would Johnson be asked to resign? No. And would the racists who are now lining up as a new racist platform, GB News is launched by the racist anti-Muslim Andrew Neil, would they be calling for the resignation of Boris Johnson because of his racism and corruption and criminality? No. So what we are looking at in this country today is that there is a very serious escalation in the attacks on Muslims and attacks on people of African and Asian origin from the Fleet Street and mainstream kind of media outlets. But there is no, and I assert that there is no real notice being taken of these by any of the funded and promoted outlets and platforms. And the pieces by the academic kind of token post holders do not come anywhere near to even recognizing the facts, let alone exposing the facts of the racist and anti-Muslims. So we go back to the four schoolgirls in Tower Hamlets who are being betrayed by the local council under the safeguarding children duties. When we say that they are being betrayed, and we don't say they have been betrayed, we include the current behavior of Tower Hamlets Council, and we include the context of the current consequences of the previous failures and negligence by Tower Hamlets Council to carry out the safeguarding duties to protect these children. And we have said exclusively, it's not recognized by anything that anyone else has said, that Shamima Begum or the other three girls have not been found guilty of any unlawful behavior. Remember what I'm saying. They have not been found guilty by a court, properly constituted court of law, of any criminality. So everything that is said about Shamima Begum is being said as a kind of fabricated, constructed image that makes her liable to be condemned by the gullibles who read or see or hear this made up fabricated stories or images. And the fact that the Tower Hamlets Council has been failing and neglecting its safeguarding children duties is not just confined to its failure to take specific action to safeguard these children. It extends to the current behavior of Tower Hamlets Council, which is maintaining a criminally conceived silence of denial of the truth. Our campaign has asked Tower Hamlets Council repeatedly to state what they have been doing to safeguard these children. And if there is any legal basis for their neglectful and negligent disregard of the duty to safeguard these children, if there has been, we say if there has been, then we have asked them to specifically refer to that particular legal ground, what law. And we've asked them to provide case law evidence, competent case law, not fabricated case law constructed by a rubber stamping court as evident in the behavior of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has disgraced itself by publishing on the 26th of February 2021 this rubber stamping of the racist, unlawful series of attacks on Shamima Begum's legal and lawful and human rights. So those PhD seekers or PhD holders who are stationed at various academic institutions in this country are engaged in serial lying and denial and careerism, because they are competing with one another over who gets to get noted by their racist approvers as being the most truthful or the more truthful exponents of the position of the targets of the racist anti-Muslim attacks. Anyone who knows linguistics and anyone who knows about the impact of language would know that nobody who claims to be in support of the Muslims when the Muslims are attacked by anti-Muslims, nobody would support the word Islamophobia, because Islam literally means peace, number one, and phobia literally means fear. So those two, just on the core, they can't combine as one word. And secondly, anyone who says that Muslims are being targeted by racists and that kind of targeting constitutes Islamophobia is accepting the fact that Islam is a faith or a religion to be afraid of, to be feared. So they're contradicting the very notion of their claim that they are against anti-Muslim attackers and writers and propagandists. And this person who has written this thing about Shamima Begum and her dresses has used Islamophobia in the wrong sense that I have just outlined. And I say that one of the media persons that has been operating in the last few years, to our knowledge, is somebody who claims to be against anti-Muslim attackers or anti-attacks. But he too uses Islamophobia, as do his other white colleagues, whom we have noticed and we have explained the difference too, and asked them not to use the Islamophobia word in the sense that they use. Because, for example, just as a linguistic kind of test, if people who say that they are against people that are attacking the Jewish community, or they're called anti-Semites, if they use the word instead of anti-Semite or anti-Semitic, if they use the term that shows that the Jews are kind of correctly identified as deserving to be attacked or targeted, all hell would let loose against any such person doing any such comparison. But that's what is happening with the Muslims. When the Muslims are called victims of Islamophobia, the people who supposedly use that word in opposition to anti-Muslim attacks are actually attacking Muslims themselves, linguistically and by using the wrong terminology or the wrong term. So anyone who has done a kind of university degree or thesis of any level about linguistics and about racism and about the meaning and impact of wrong words or words wrongly used has got a duty to examine the contents and then drop using the wrong word and wrong phrase or wrong words and phrases. And so we shall move on to other items, but that is the extent of today's update on that particular aspect. We shall go back to talking about Shamima Begum and the continuing failure, negligence and racist denial, anti-Muslim denial by the Tar Amrest Council and the local elected MPs and by the, can you imagine, mayor in place at the expense of London. And now there is a piece about Imran Khan reportedly making a comment about women, and he is reported as saying that women who are attacked by sexists, according to this heading in the Times, he's saying Khan says women tempt attackers. In his Playboy days as a cricket star in 1980s London, Imran Khan was renowned for pursuing models around the nightclub circuit. Decades on, the Prime Minister of Pakistan has provoked outrage with comments blaming women's dress for a surge in rape cases in the country. That is Pakistan. So Hugh Tomlinson writes, during a televised interview, Khan 65 fielded a question from a caller asking what his government was doing to combat a rise in sexual violence in Pakistan. Lashing out at declining standards of modesty among women, Khan replied that an increase in rape indicated the consequences in any society where vulgarity is on the rise. Conceding that rape attacks were increasing in Pakistan, Imran Khan urged women to cover up to avoid tempting potential attackers and praised the Islamic concept of parda or modesty. He said that his government would introduce legislation aimed at protecting women from sexual assault, but stressed that it was up to society as a whole to assist by preserving female modesty. The comments broadcast on Sunday have provoked uproar with women's groups attacking Khan's remarks as a further retrograde step in a country with an already dismal record on sexual violence and gender equality. Jemima Goldsmith, Khan's first wife, tweeted that she hoped that his comments were a misunderstanding or mistranslation. Khan has grown more conservative since returning home to enter politics in 1996. His third wife, Bushra Bibi, 46, was veiled at their wedding in 2018, and she covers her hair and face during public appearances. Now, that raises a number of issues, and we shall go briefly through the issues. Now, that summary, I think, factually represents Imran Khan's state of intellectual grasp about all aspects of the relationship between women tempting their attackers and the women's rights. Because Imran Khan doesn't appear to understand the universal concept of rights, even if the women were dressed in a particular way. It is a big and unjustified and irresponsible leap to say that women tempt the attackers, because the women didn't tempt their attackers in most of the attacks that killed them. And all accounts of the various things, various crimes that all the murderers of women, all the accounts, 95%, I would say, of the attacks are targeted. Nothing to do with the women tempting or doing anything. And Imran Khan is failing his duties by making such a comment. Number one. Number two, in the last few months, I have asked him directly in this broadcast a number of things that he should be doing to correct the records of the various people that were in post and in power before he even got into politics. But I have put the option to him as a kind of amending the records of Pakistan. And I've done that as part of what I've been doing about the last 75 years. Let's say 1947 onwards in the subcontinent. And just to make it very clear, I could have been in a kind of government state position a very long time ago. But the reason I didn't is because I refuse to do so by telling lies or ingratiating myself with criminals in position of power. That is the simple truth. And my range of understanding is far wider than Imran Khan's will ever be. But he is misunderstanding advice from me, because I've been giving this on the record, not in any other way. But if his silence on the issues that I have clearly stated he should act on is to do with his knowledge and his decision himself that he is not going to follow my advice, then it shows that he is not only stupid in the context, but is also unfit morally. All I have asked Imran Khan to do about 1971 is to apologize to the people who were attacked by the Pakistan army, the civilians. I have not briefed for the military side of the things because, as I said, India has claimed that it liberated Bangladesh in December 1971, and I don't know what the evidence is of the extent of the Indian army vis-a-vis the Pakistan army during 1971. I don't. But I do know that civilian people of then East Pakistan were criminally targeted for massacres and shooting and rape and other crimes by the Pakistan army. And none of the targeted people committed any crime. And Imran Khan has no option but to acknowledge that and to say sorry in a big way and cover all the victims and then start to pay the compensations to their survivors or relatives. That's a start, I have said to him. And he has not done that, and there is no sign that he is likely to do anything. And so, therefore, his comments about women tempting men or their attackers is absolutely, factually unacceptable, unsustainable, and unjustifiable. So, we shall continue on Imran Khan in due course later, but not in this particular piece. The item in the Times about the Bristol area policeman resigning after being criticized about the police behavior towards the anti-police bill protests is very interesting, because the criticism of this particular police force covering the Bristol area, the criticism is of far smaller, if you like, impact than the criticisms that have been made against the London Metropolitan Police and its attacks on the protesters. Peaceful protesters paying respect to Sarah Everard last month. We shall cover the Sarah Everard protesters. But let's have a kind of short look, brief look at the Times item about the Bristol protests. This is given, a byline is given to the Times' current crime editor, Fiona Hamilton. And it says the Chief Constable of Avon and Somerset is stepping down after his force was criticized over its handling of protests, and Bristol suffered its worst rioting in a decade. Now, the man is called Andy Marsh. Andy Marsh, who had led the force since 2016, said that he would not seek an extension to his contract when it runs out in the summer. Marsh told senior colleagues last summer that he feared for his future in the job after sustained public criticism of him when officers stood back as protesters tore down the statue of the slave trader Edward Colston. The statue was later recovered. Marvin Rees, the mayor of Bristol, said he could not condone criminal damage, but described the statue as a personal affront to him, and toppling it was an act of historical poetry. Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, was said to have had a firm conversation with Marsh afterwards, in which she demanded an explanation, made clear that she expected those who pulled the statue down to be charged. And it goes on because it says that although he's going to end his contract and not renew it, the Times report says that he was backed by the police watchdog over the way he dealt with the Black Lives Matter protests in Bristol. So that shows a continuity in the status quo. The watchdog doesn't really kind of watch and audit the behavior of the chief constable in a police force. And the biggest evidence of that is to be found in the Sarah Everard protests handling by the London Metropolitan Police. And despite the fact that they were high profile and highly detailed outrage expressed at the way that the London Metropolitan Police behaved over the peaceful vigil by mourners over Sarah Everard. The watchdog found that the police had behaved themselves correctly. So this is the pattern. The watchdog never finds the police wrong. And this actually includes the police behavior when in the Stockwell tube station, the police shot dead an innocent man. And the person who was linked with the command chain for that incident is the commissioner of the police now. And there is a piece in the Times today on the same page 15 that is headed "Unfit Home for Migrants to Stay Open." And it's written by the Home Affairs editor of the Times newspaper. A migrant center described as unfit for human habitation will be kept open by Priti Patel to house an expected surge in channel crossings this summer. Now we shall comment on that again a little while later. And there is a twisted reference to slavery. And it says, gangs paying for lawyers of cannabis slaves, judge fears. Albanian drug gangs are paying for private lawyers to defend apparently penniless slaves caught running cannabis farms, a judge fears. So-called gardeners from Albania have been discovered running cannabis farms across Britain and invariably use the provisions designed to safeguard victims of modern slavery. Now, this is not about a judge in a court. It's about the failure of the local councils. I mean, they're not doing the safeguarding the victims of organized crime either. So this is the illustration of the status quo. The culture of illegality, illegal denial of service to those who need protecting and saving and safeguarding. It covers not only the likes of the four Bethnal Green schoolgirls, but it also includes penniless people from Albania being exploited in the most extreme way by the gangs operating in the UK. So there is this state of lawlessness, the state of denial of service that dominates the behavior of public institutions in this country. So is there an outrage about that? And the so-called education secretary, the anti-Muslim hate spreader Gavin Williamson, is being falsely given credit for calling for a crackdown on use of telephones in this classroom. Now, a crackdown is a completely inappropriate word because it suggests real, timely, and consistent action. Schools, anyone who knows about the atmosphere environment in the classroom, are out of order, out of control. And the Murdoch scum is attacking an anti-racist initiative, and we shall be reading. In the editorial so-called, it says on page 10, race disgrace. The vile racism directed at Liverpool stars Trent Alexander-Arnold, Naby Keita, and Sadio Mane is repugnant. The Neanderthals who responsible must be identified and prosecuted. Liverpool Football Club rightly says social media abuse cannot be allowed to continue. What will Instagram do about it? Owners Facebook with billions and the finest tech minds pledge tougher measures. Yet the torrent of filth goes on. Thierry Henry had to quit social media. It is appalling that black players must do so because tech giants won't protect them. Now, that is racist because all the protection that these attacks victims deserve from the local councils and the police are not provided. So they're deprived of the protection. And so this editorial, which is part of the line that was evident on Sunday when Karen Brady wrote the piece about the footballers being targeted by racists and they must stop. This looks like a continuation of the line that Karen Brady put a name to on the Scum on Sunday. And there is another attack on a Muslim by Rod Little in the Scum on page 15. The headline is not, written with an express attack on Muslims, but that's what it is. And the reason why that attack on Muslims is happening is because the local council, which in this case is Rochdale, I think, in Greater Manchester, has failed to do its duties to the victims of the rapes that were committed by this man, Qari Abdul Rauf, and his co-criminals. These are the Muslims who bring disgrace and disrepute to the Muslim community, the innocent Muslim community, the majority, the vast majority. And the fact that this criminal, who was apparently subject to a deportation order, has been spotted shopping in the Greater Manchester area, shows that the police were not bothered about him, nor were the Labour Party, nor were the local members of parliament, except one ex kind of Labour Party campaigner. And this actually shows that the Muslim community as a whole in the UK doesn't have an organized platform to monitor the behavior of people like Qari Abdul Rauf and to protect the community, the whole community, from criminals like him. And there is no education. And the schools are failing, totally failing, absolutely failing, because there is no curriculum or education program anywhere in the schools in England that actually addresses the violence against women and rape and the targeting of vulnerable children, mainly girls. In the case of these Pakistani origin or Pakistani linked criminals, the main targets were white girls, which is a disgrace manifold. It should never have been allowed to take place even once. And it has gone on for nearly 20 years or more. Not this particular criminal, but other criminals as well across the Yorkshire region and in the Greater Manchester area. And this is an example where a committed racist and hater of Muslims, such as Rod Liddell, is given a plausible reason for attacking Muslims. Now the question is, when a criminal like the Qari Abdul Rauf goes about raping, targeting white girls, because if he targeted Asian girls, that would be as reprehensible, as criminal, and as unacceptable. But the likes of Rod Liddell wouldn't take notice, not in any way they take notice about this particular attacker of white girls. That does not mean to say that we are in any way suggesting that white girls should not be protected. We are in fact saying that more protection should be given to the white girls that have been targeted for attack over the years. And what Rod Lindley is saying, that the legal system, the court system, which is absolutely corrupt and criminal and racist, is to blame for this lingering delay in deporting the likes of Kari Abdul Rauf from Britain. He is blaming the courts. And he says that such are the complexities of the law that it seems to be almost impossible to kick people out of our country. It doesn't matter if they are a child rapist, a known terrorist, or a heroin dealer. The lawyers are very soon on the case, and you would have more luck moving a mountain. And then he says, you, that is the reader of this piece in the Murdoch Scum, you may remember at the end of last year, that is 2020, we tried to kick out 50 criminals of Jamaican origin, all on one flight. In the end, only 13 went. The rest are still happily living among us, drug pushers, gangsters, and violent offenders. Can't kick them out if they've got a child in this country, or a wife, or if they can show that they might not have a pleasant time of it in their country of origin. Can't kick them out if their country of origin is a bit nasty either, which it usually is. That too would be an abuse of their human rights. So, what we have said before about the Black Lives Matter being disconnected is that there is only a kind of peripheral, kind of smoke screen type of appearance in the substance of a thing called Black Lives Matter. They are not operating substantially, dealing with the substance of the criminality and disrepute or disreputable behavior by the black people, let's say for the Jamaican origin ones, the African origin ones through the Caribbean, or the African origin ones directly coming here from Africa, or by the Muslims, or by the others in the Asian background community. There is no platform, there is no avenue. And without that, the existing so-called legal and state kind of logistics and structure and frames are not ever going to catch up with the duties that are owed to the victims and the duties to prevent the crimes and criminality. And that actually entails, involves, requires, demands the presence, the availability of significant, sustained resources and activities round the clock. Activities to counter the delays, the denials, and the negligence of the police, the court bureaucracies, the local councils, the elected councillors, the elected members of parliament, and the decision makers in the various charitable organizations, and of course by the licensed law traders who are craving funds under so-called legal aid, which is a completely corrupt, kind of misleading title, legal aid. Legal aid suggests that the person whose case is being used to give the licensed law trader the money under legal aid is getting the money. That is the most compelling misconception. The main money is going to the pocket of the licensed law traders. And what Rod Liddell doesn't say is that most of the cases of delays that he complains about, these are traceable to the behavior of licensed law traders who earn the money. And there is a piece in the Financial Times trying to explain the rivalry between Williams and Harry. And it is speculating that it is probably sibling rivalry that is the root of the crisis. And what we have been saying for the last 10 months, let's say, of this broadcast, but we have been saying for tens of years in the last few decades, is the parallel health crisis of the COVID pandemic. What we have been saying is that the UK, both political parties or the parliament have neglected to implement and carry out the implementation of the properly equipping of the National Health Service for the last nearly 80 years. And we have said originally, factually, diagnostically, that the absence of a National Health Service ready to deliver and actually actively delivering service at the point of need is traceable to the absence of this preparation and installation. And that is because the people making the decision about the National Health Service have not really understood the real connection between the slogan and the reality of the needs of the people in the country to be served with health care at the point of need. And instead of the slogan being to implement the NHS as an able service, delivering the service that is needed, the slogan has been, the Labour Party has been the main supporter of the NHS. And the Conservatives have claimed that they have been as dedicated to preserving the NHS, which is absolutely untrue, because the Conservatives have been an agent of the anti-NHS forces in big business, big pharma companies and others for the last 75 years. So Fleet Street has not provided a factual commentary and narrative about what actually the facts are and have been day to day. And that has included the Financial Times. So why the Financial Times is saying in the second editorial today that it says parallel health crisis of the COVID pandemic, increased mental illness and cancer are causing suffering and deaths. It is saying in the last paragraph, but one, in the UK, around 4.4 million fewer cancer diagnostic tests took place last year than in 2019, and 44,000 fewer patients started treatment. Experts estimate that very brutally week's delay in cancer referral reduces a patient's chance of surviving by 1%. In the long run, the mental health and cancer fields can improve efficiency by learning lessons from the pandemic. For example, treating more patients remotely, whether by running more video consultations or prescribing more drugs that can be taken at home. But action is needed now to tackle the immediate crisis in both areas. And again, we said that the Financial Times is missing the main evidence. The main evidence is the NHS is not being made ready and prepared and equipped to deliver the healthcare that it supposedly exists to deliver. And at the same time, it's in denial about the pharma companies and pharma corporations and pharma conglomerates using as stooges various consultants and various other administrative bureaucracies in control of the various NHS facilities to obstruct the service of care to those mostly in need, including those that are covered by the Financial Times editorial, and also to hide the obstruction by various slogans and other things. And all of this brings the commentary to the point of what is Keir Starmer doing? And as we have been saying, Keir Starmer politically has murdered the Labour Party. So there is no presence in defending the NHS ideas by implementing the necessary installations and operating as an audit, daily audit of the whether the NHS is being held back and being robbed of funding by diversion to the big pharmas and others. And the Financial Times doesn't carry any news coverage, doesn't contain news of what is going on, as I have listed again. Now there is the court case in the Daily Mail where a man aged 43 was stalking a well-known television presenter, and also who threatened the presenter that she would be killed and her daughter would be raped. And the Daily Mail has got an editorial. We shall go to the editorial a bit later, but let's look at this comment piece by Stephen Glover on page 19 of the Daily Mail. And what it is actually based on is the item yesterday that they actually retailed on the Taxpayers Alliance. The Taxpayers Alliance says that 2,800 employees in various councils are receiving salaries over £100,000. Now, anyone who knows about the cost of living and so on would know that that is way above the ordinary people's income. Way above. So what Stephen Glover is saying is taking a kind of critical look at the town hall's corruption. Now, whether he's calling them corrupt is a different matter, but he might not be. Now we shall continue with this Stephen Glover. He's saying that anyone who wants their children to get rich should tell the children to sign up at the town hall. So he's presenting the disclosure by the Taxpayers Alliance that money is kind of spread all over the floors of the local council. He's saying, like many people of my age, I sometimes ask myself whether I took the right path in life. Would I have been happier if, when young, I had set my heart on becoming a council official? It certainly didn't occur to me or to anyone advising me that I should do so. In those days, self-effacing town clerks still ran councils. Though they usually seemed pretty competent, they were not especially well paid. Being an official was not the route to riches. Whereas in the previous era, council officials had worked largely out of a sense of public duty. And he's comparing the Taxpayers Allowance report of this year that shows that 2,800 of the council's employees across England are getting paid more than £100,000 a year. He's comparing that with the factually accurate and much smaller amounts of salaries being paid to the armed forces, members of the army. But what Stephen Glover and the Daily Mail and the rest of Fleet Street failed to understand and acknowledge and report is that the fact that there is such a corrupt culture in the town hall, in the councils, is not an accident. It's not something that is happening because nobody told them that it would happen. I have been telling them for the entirety of the last 50 years that councils are corrupt, incompetent, negligent, ignorant, and of course racist. And all of this because there is no audit. There is no holding the councils to account for their behavior. And the elected councillors, who notoriously are ignorant and morally deficient, the ignorant councillors are to be found in inner London, Tower Hamlets, Southwark, Lambeth, Camden, Hackney, Islington. These councils employ personnel in positions of making decisions with seriously disproportionately higher amounts of salaries than these people would be paid or payable if their competence and their reliability, their level of integrity were taken into account. But none of this happens in the councils. And Tower Hamlets Council is one of the worst examples of criminality. Let's look at the historical record now. This is April. Remember what month we are talking about. In April 2006, the first fortnight, let's say 8 or 9 or 10th of April 2006, George Galloway, in his second year as the quote elected member of parliament for the area, Bethnal Green and Bow, organized a stunt news conference, so-called. And he started by holding a pamphlet that was associated with the then leading councillor, Michael Crook, in Tower Hamlets Council. Now, Michael Crook is the name that I have given to Michael Keith because of his crooked record and behavior and attitude. Now, he said, George Galloway, that he was holding the news conference to draw attention to the illegalities done by Michael Crook. And that was in the context of the then about to happen local council election, which was due in May, which was the next month in 2006. And in the course of introducing his attack on Michael Crook, whom George Galloway started calling Michael Crook after me, but not acknowledging that I am the only one who had been calling Crook the Crook. And in introducing his purpose for holding this so-called news conference, George Galloway, who was smoking a pipe by disrespecting the people gathered in the room that was owned or controlled at the time by a man called Azmal Hussain. And George Galloway said, by way of introduction, that at that time, 30 years in politics, he had come across quite a few local councils. And of all the councils that he had come across in the 30 years or so of his experience in politics, George Galloway said that he had never come across a local council as corrupt as Tower Hamlets Council. Think about that. So, when Stephen Glover writes these on 8th of April 2021, he is probably doing this almost exactly on the day or date when George Galloway condemned Tower Hamlets Council as the most corrupt council he had ever come across in 30 years of his time in politics up to that time. Now, it would be reasonable, logical, and rational and moral and ethical after what Galloway said in April 2006 that he would oppose any corruption in Tower Hamlets Council, and most certainly he would oppose any further corrupting of the Tower Hamlets Council. Think about what I'm saying. Because he had said that Tower Hamlets Council was the most corrupt council he had come across in 30 years of his time in politics. So what did Galloway do? Instead of opposing the existing level of corruption of Tower Hamlets Council, George Galloway joined corruptors that were plotting to make Tower Hamlets Council even more corrupt. George Galloway appeared in the Hanbury Street outside a building called the Brady Center on 6th of February 2010. That was just under 4 years since April 2006. And George Galloway said to those who were outside the Brady Center campaigning against the imposition of a elected mayor post, that he wanted to speak in support of the imposition of a mayor post. Well, we call it imposition, but he was at that time supporting the call that vote yes at the referendum on the 6th of May 2010. The question about whether to have an elected mayor or not. I had the microphone, loud hailer, and I was addressing the people campaigning, or at least supporting the campaign for no. And George Galloway, who knew me sufficiently by that time, asked me, probably expecting that I'd give him the microphone and let him speak. Galloway completely misunderstood my role and my principle and my records. I said, no way. You are for the very thing that we are opposing. So Galloway didn't get the chance to address the people campaigning for a no vote. And today, 8th of April 2021, I'm asking anyone watching this from Tower Hamlets, or anyone watching this who knows anyone in Tower Hamlets among the electors, to seriously campaign in the next 27 days and to make sure that the voters vote no to the elected mayor post on the 6th of May 2021. So what we are saying here is that Like Stephen Glover in the Daily Mail today, 8th of April 2021, George Galloway in April 2006 and in February 2010 exposed his shallowness. That he was, on the one hand, on the April 2006, claiming to be opposed to racism in the council. Sorry, corruption in the council. I said that again, it's a correction, corruption in the council and corruption of Tower Hamlets Council in particular. He was decrying that corruption and associating the Michael Crook as the crook at the time who was continuing the corruption of the council. And Stephen Glover saying that this Taxpayers Alliance has showed that the councils are fleecing the communities. But neither Stephen Glover nor George Galloway has outlined any recognition on their part separately that the only way to stop the corruption is to hold the people making the decision accountable for their decisions. And without that, the crooks continue to fester as they have been festering. They are festering, for example, they have been festering in Tower Hamlets by refusing service to the Bethnal Green schoolgirls when these girls have been exposed to danger and brainwashing and diversion. And the Daily Mail is still not talking about the duties of Tower Hamlets Council, despite the fact that it has been running quite a few crafty and racistly motivated pieces about and around Shamima Begum, but not connecting any wrongdoing with the council, Tower Hamlets Council, which could have stopped Shamima Begum and the other three girls from being brainwashed and being destroyed in terms of the brainwashing. So you see, the diagnosis of Fleet Street is far wider than the newspaper headlines may appear, or in the case of George Galloway, the self-seeking promotion by Galloway may suggest. Because, as we have said, Galloway has not made a comment about the Tower Hamlets Council's failure to safeguard these children. Not only that, Galloway could not make a comment that carried any integrity, any honesty about his position in relation to holding the local council to account and safeguarding children in the context of the duties owed by the local council, because, as the evidence shows, in March 2010, that is less than a month after I refused to give him the microphone outside the Brady Center in Hanbury Street, George Galloway was mentioned, let's say, by Andrew Gilligan in a Dispatches edition that Andrew Gilligan fronted on Channel 4 and broadcast on the 1st of March 2010. Galloway was mentioned about the plot to have an elected mayor post holder foisted onto Armed Council. The plot, as Andrew Gilligan portrayed it, and in paraphrase, we are saying the following: cooked by elements operating from the complex called the East London Mosque or the London Muslim Centre complex. And the idea behind the imposition of the post of elected mayor was driven by, as described on the program itself, by the real chance that the post carried the power affecting the huge sum of money available to the council. So when the election took place and the mayor was installed in October 2010, George Galloway was not publicly heard saying anything about that post or its impact, let alone anything to do with corruption, let alone anything to do with ending corruption in Armed Council. Now, as the evidence shows, and as the leading source for the summary of the evidence, which is the ruling in the name of Richard Morey, the licensed law trader who sat as the election commissioner. This is April, remember? In April 2015, Morey lists about 50 different wrongs, illegalities committed by Lutfur Rahman or committed by his agents or his supporters. Now this was, remember, Richard Morey's ruling was on the 23rd of April 2015. And a few months earlier, in November 2014, George Galloway appeared at a place in the Mile End Road at a public gathering. The public gathering that had been organized, quote, to support the campaign to keep Lutfur Rahman in post against the decision by the then Cabinet Minister for Housing and Communities, Eric Pickles, to send a squad known as the commissioners to take over the administration of Armed Council. This was done by Eric Pickles in a speech he gave in the House of Commons, London, on the 4th of November 2014. And the meeting in the Mile End Road, organized to oppose Eric Pickles' decision, was mainly a meeting organized informally to defend the Muslims. Now, that was an absolutely corrupt and corruptly promoted line. It wasn't anything to do with the defense of the Muslims. It was to do with disgrace. It was to do with supporting the disgracing of the Muslims' name by a corrupt mayor administration fronted by Lutfur Rahman. Remember what we have said earlier about George Galloway, his claim against Michael Crook in April 2006. Now, of the people that were invited as the, quote, superior speakers, notice what we are saying, were George Galloway, Ken Lying Still Livingston. Lying Still is my name for Ken Livingston. And Keith Sleaze Vaz. Sleaze is my word for him, middle name. These three criminals, as judged by their support of the crimes and the denials of the criminal behavior by the regime fronted by Luther Roman, they didn't hold back. Sleazebaz wasn't present, but he was spiritually present. I shall say that about the message or messages. But these were the same people that had actually appeared at the platform on the 6th of February 2010 at the Brady Center. And Sleazebaz actually had certified Luther Roman as the best candidate for mayor of Tower Hamlets. Now, Sleazebaz had no right to say that, because Sleazebaz did never live in Tower Hamlets, and Sleazebaz had been disgracefully treated for his disgraceful behavior in the 1980s, shortly after he got elected for the first time, when Sleazebaz made an offensive remark, offensive, criminally untruthful, untrue, and poisonously defamatory remark against a campaigning member of the community at the meeting. And Sleazebaz was forced to apologize for that remark at that meeting before he could. He was told that if he didn't apologize and withdraw this remark, he would not leave the meeting in the same form that he came in. So that is the disgraceful kind of past record of Sleazebaz. So here was this man, this disgraced man, brought back to the same center, Brady Center, by the supporters of the plot to have an elected mayor in the first place, and then to support the corrupt regime of Luther Roman, who was now under attack from Eric Pickles, the cabinet minister for housing and local government. And Pickles had sent commissioners. So the main speakers at that November 2014 gathering in the Mile End Road included Ken Lying Still Livingston and George Galloway. And what George Galloway said was not something original, something truthful, something respectful, something recognizing the realities of Tower Hamlets Council and the corruption that had been aggravated by Luther Roman's corrupt regime. Galloway was part of the agenda to condemn Eric Pickles, not for being the person sending the commissioners to take over Tower Hamlets Council, but they overstated his anti-democratic behavior in that decision. And Galloway and Ken Livingstone delivered the speech or their speeches to a gathering of mainly ignorant people that had been brought there by the organizers who had relied on the spiritual kind of element, that the Muslim community was being attacked by a British minister. The minister wasn't attacking a Muslim community at all. The minister was addressing widespread discontent that had been caused by the corruption and anti-democratic behavior fronted by Lutfur Rahman. One of the things that Ken Livingstone said at that meeting, as recorded on the radio reporter's tape recorder on the BBC, which played the contents not long after the meeting, said that the unnamed crowd should go to the house or homes of the commissioners that had been known so far and demand that they quit their post or whatever. We shall fact check the actual quotation and the date and the place, the venue of the meeting that took place there in Mile End Road, and then we shall update the facts in due course. But essentially the call by Ken Livingstone and George Galloway, the call or calls were totally stupid, factually unsustainable. And the fact that these two white men were given the prime spot in that gathering showed the servility on the part of Lutfur Rahman and his co-organizers to the image of the white man or white persons as being inherently superior. Lutfur Rahman never acknowledged the existence of the campaign or the campaigns that I have been running for the years since, even before he was actually born biologically. So whenever he had a platform, he invited immature, ignorant, and racist white speakers to talk to harmless people about racism. One of them was Owen Jones. Owen Jones, the perennially stupid infant, was given a platform in the Alta Valley Park on the 6th or 7th of September 2013 by Lutfur Rahman. And Owen, the perennial infant, Jones, looked at the screen of his mobile and he gave a spiel. While we had to suffer, just for the sake of evidence, this embarrassing stupidity by the mental slaves, including Lutfur Rahman, who were servile to the white speakers at the Alta Valley Park, to the exclusion of the entirety of the campaign that we ran before and we have been running since. So when Ken Livingstone made that stupid call inciting people to go and shout and make noise and threaten the commissioners that had been appointed by Eric Pickles, that did what the racist left, so-called, have been doing for a long time to sabotage local anti-racist campaign mobilization. As I recall the incident on Friday the 10th of September, I think, to 1993, when the racists created a bogus confrontation between the Bangladeshi youths and the police outside the Royal London Hospital in Whitechapel Road, thus sabotaging the campaign that I had started 2 days earlier against the racist attack on Quddus Ali in the Commercial Road. And those racists managed to shift the attention from the legitimate and powerful demand for action against the racists for the attack on Quddus Ali to a headline in the Daily Mail and the Sun headlines saying that the thugs had attacked the police in Whitechapel Road. And therefore they rallied the gullibles who rallied with the racist attackers, undermining the campaign that I had successfully run for 24 hours until then or 48 hours until then. So what happened with Ken Livingstone spewing in November 2014 was to shift the attention from any genuine anti-racist grievance that might prevail against Eric Pickles to an allegation that the mob supporting the corrupt mayor of Lutfur Tower Hamlets were now inciting people to go and physically attack the commissioners that had been appointed by Eric Pickles. This is fact. This is not some kind of supposition from some kind of generalization. And I'm telling the so-called academics operating either from Cambridge or Oxford or anywhere else that do not tell lies about racism, anti-Muslim kind of attacks, and our defense of the community across the board for the last 5 decades, if not for longer. No PhD has been written, PhD thesis, that recognizes the community. So stop doing this and stop commissioning new PhD bogus kind of research. As I said, because if you do, these will not be doctorates in philosophy, but there will be prostitutes holding diplomas or degrees, or prostitutes holding glorified documents, PhDs. We campaign from the grassroots, from the ground, and we do this with integrity, absolute universality, and evidence and transparency and fairness and universality. So Stephen Glover saying that the councils are abusing the funds, he is telling only a fraction of the truth. And George Galloway, appearing with Ken Livingstone in November 2014, wasn't answering the questions. He was, George Galloway, being continued to be used by the same criminal elements that wanted to further corrupt the Tower Hamlets Council in 2010, and they had done. And to this day, and in the years between November 2014 and now, none of the people who cooked up the corrupt plot to foist an elected mayor post and then foist Lutfur Rahman on that post, none of those people has come out to explain why they corrupted the council and why they corrupted the community and why they destroyed the credibility of the community. So what we are looking at in the Daily Mirror, for example, the Daily Mail now is this piece by Stephen Glover, who is supposed to be the in-house kind of thinker of the Daily Mail. But he's not. He's not providing any real moral, ethical thoughts for the eradication of council criminality. So if we said to the Daily Mail that we have been campaigning against council corruption in Tower Hamlets for 50 years, the Daily Mail would not cooperate with us, because that would actually remove from the Daily Mail the excuse to attack the community in Tower Hamlets and in the areas. And it would not give them the kind of excuse to run pieces against the so-called left. Pieces like this one that they're running today against Len McCluskey. Remember Len McCluskey, who has been shown in photographs, standing for photographs, along with Luther Roman and another person in the local area, against the background of the East London Mosque in Whitechapel Road. Now, as we have said in many of the posts or in the broadcasts, Len McCluskey is a supporter of corruption in the councils. And we shall be talking about the role that McCluskey has been playing in the corrupt narrative, pro-corruption narrative mouthed by Jeremy Corbyn through 5 years of his